Welcome to We Mean Business. I'm Steve Dorfman. So today we are with returning guest, Dan Pink, New York Times bestselling author. Dan's books have sold millions and millions of copies. He writes on the changing world of work, and his latest book is called To Sell is Human, The Surprising Truth About Moving Others. Dan, in the 90s, worked as aide to Secretary Robert Reich. He was also chief speechwriter for Vice President Al Gore. And in Dan's new book, he talks about how the ABCs of selling have changed from always be closing to something he sums up as attunement, buoyancy, and clarity. Dan, welcome to the show. Welcome back.
Steve, it's great to be back.
So the subtitle
and similarly dressed.
I know, always.
Yes.
The subtitle of the book mentions moving others.
Yeah.
So is it safe to say that is all that sales really is?
That's a big part of what sales is, and I'm glad you. It's glad to pick up on that because that's really core to the idea in the book. One of the ideas is that, like it or not, we're all in sales now. 1 in 9 people in the workforce, their job is to sell stuff. They're selling consulting services, aircraft parts, wholesale seafood. Okay, that's 1 in 9 people. But the rest of us who don't have sales in our title, the other 8 in 9, I'm convinced that they're in sales too, and we have some interesting data showing that they're spending a lot of their time on the job, as you say, moving other people. They are. Someone saying to someone on their one of their colleagues, "Come and work on my project," rather than another project. That's selling. It's, let's say you're my boss. I go to you as my boss. Hey, boss, can I have some more resources? I'm selling. You're my boss, and you're trying to get me to do something different or do something in a different way. You're selling. And so one of the ideas is that if you look at what people actually do at work, our vocabulary to describe it, our vocabulary to describe economic activity is a little bit constrained. We talk about producing, we talk about consuming, but a lot of what people actually do on the job is moving other people. Mm-hmm.
And it certainly spills over into the home life and
sure.
Trying to move our family, our kids to do things, right?
You got it. So, and then trying to move us to do things too.
So the term "we're all in sales"
yeah.
It's not a new term. I've been hearing it for decades.
Yeah.
So why write a book about this? Why now?
Because I think actually, well, for a couple of reasons. I think that the idea that we are all in sales and that this a big portion of what we do on the job is moving others is actually, that itself I think is a pretty fresh idea. And there hasn't been to this date any data actually verifying that claim. The other thing is that if you look at the reasons this is happening, there are some really interesting reasons that make it very prominent and significant now. For instance, we had this prediction. You're talking about the halcyon days of the mid-1990s, the late 1990s, when people predicted that salespeople would be disintermediated, if you remember that word, that they would go the way of meter maids and milkmen. And the strange thing that happened is that the technologies that were supposed to disintermediate salespeople did that a little bit, but they also turned more of us into salespeople. They allowed more people to become small entrepreneurs. All small entrepreneurs are in sales. If you look at the configuration of certain kinds of new technology companies, extremely interesting. I wrote a little bit about a company called Palantir Technologies, which has an office here in the D.C. area. It's a $300 million a year company. It has revenues, sales, $300 million a year. It's a valuation of $1 billion. $300 million a year in sales, and they have no salespeople. Whoa. It's kind of freaky. And when you ask them this question, there are other companies like this, they give you these weird Zen-like answers. No one's in sales because everyone's in sales. Everyone's in sales, therefore no one's in sales. What's going on here? And those are the kind of, and actually that kind of configuration inside of a firm is something that you didn't see even 5 years ago. So I think there's some really, really interesting trends happening in the economy that are pushing more of us into the world of sales or non-sales selling. And what I was trying to do here is give people a wider lens to look at their own work, to look at their own organizations, and then hopefully they understand their own work and their own organizations better, and then try to equip them with some ways to actually get a little bit more adept at doing these things.
Back in 1995, when you were writing speeches for Vice President Al Gore, I was selling luxury automobiles. And at that time, the internet was kind of new for most people.
Right.
Everybody kind of had their first AOL account,
right,
back
sure,
1995, right?
Uh-huh.
So at that time, I remember people saying that the internet might replace salespeople. I spent the next 11 years selling luxury autos for that one dealership. And that didn't happen. The internet didn't replace salespeople. Tell tell our viewers what really happened.
But I mean, it did have an effect, particularly on.
Oh, yeah.
It did have an effect. That's a great example. So let's say, so you're selling luxury automobiles, and so let's say I go in there to buy a luxury automobile, which I've never done before. I drive a Toyota, but let's say, I don't know, something, I convert and I decide that I'm going to buy a luxury automobile. It's 1995, okay? 1995, I go in there to buy a luxury automobile from you. You're the seller, I'm the buyer. You got way more information. You know a lot more about autos, a lot more about that particular make, a lot more about that model than I ever could, right? My guidance there, buyer beware. I'm in an asymmetrical relationship here. You have a lot more information than I do. Cut, fade out. It is, what is that, 18 years later? Yeah, 18 years. Is that it's been 18 years since 95?
Isn't that crazy?
Good God.
I know.
Sure, I got a kid born in 96. Anyway, enough. I'll put aside my midlife crisis for a moment and move on to the conversation. So now I come in to buy a luxury automobile. You're gone. You've gone on to greener pastures. But your successor is in there. I go in to buy a luxury automobile. It's a different ballgame. All right? There's not this asymmetrical information relationship. I've gone in there. You know what I have here, Mr. Salesperson? I have a printout showing what that particular make of luxury automobiles is going for at various dealerships around the Washington metropolitan area. I've been online to a user group of that particular make, and I know all the idiosyncrasies and the whatever make and model of this is. And I know there's this weird thing in the trunk. It's not a defect, but everyone's complaining about it, and there's no way that I could ever know that in 1995, but I know it now, and I'm going to get $200 off the price because I know this little glitchy thing that's going on there. I interviewed a car dealer here in D.C. When she first started selling cars in the 1980s, the factory invoice price of the car, what the dealer paid. I mean, I don't need to tell you that, but your viewers, but literally the physical artifact, the piece of paper, the invoice price of the car, locked in the safe.
Yeah.
Salespeople weren't allowed to see it. Now, my Aunt Gladys in Gaithersburg can walk into your dealership with the invoice price of the car. Right. Okay, so the asymmetrical information relationship has become a relationship of information parity.
Yeah.
Buyer beware is still a good idea. But what's also happened is that it's now seller beware. Okay? You try to do something duplicitous, you try to rip me off, you try to take the low road, and I can find out more easily. And what's worse for you, I can talk back. I can say, hey, Acme Luxury Motors in Kensington just tried to hoodwink me, and I tell everybody on Facebook. And so that's a world of seller beware, and I think it's a great example that you just posed, because in my view, selling in a world of seller beware is a totally different game than selling in a world of buyer beware.
Yes, it is. So you talk about the ABCs of selling: attunement, buoyancy, clarity. What's the give us the Cliff's notes on these three things?
Sure. So the catalytic the catalyst gets us there is this shift from buyer beware to seller beware. And so if you want to sell in a world of seller beware, how do you get better at it? My way of answering that question is looking at the social science. There's a whole array of social science out there that gives us clues about how to do this. And these three foundational qualities, these new ABCs, are attunement, buoyancy, and clarity. Attunement. Can I get out of my own head and take your perspective? Now I'm the seller. Can I get out of my own head and take your perspective? Attune myself to your point of view. Buoyancy. A lot of rejection in sales. That's why people don't like it. One guy I talked to talked about sales being an ocean of rejection. Buoyancy. How do I stay buoyant? How do I stay afloat in that ocean of rejection?
Is that how you came up with the term? Buoyancy?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I got this great metaphor from this guy who sells fuller brushes. He says that the hardest part about being in sales, he's done this for 40 years.
Yeah.
Hardest part about being in sales, he said, is every day I get up and I stare out into an ocean of rejection. It's his beautiful poetic phrase, an ocean of rejection. So how do I stay buoyant when I'm going to get rejected a lot? And finally, is clarity. Again, there's information parity. So having access to information doesn't give me as a seller any kind of comparative advantage. What gives me a comparative advantage is being able to curate information, and also to not to solve existing problems, but to identify problems people don't realize that they have, to move from problem solving to problem fighting. So those foundational qualities, attunement, buoyancy, and clarity, end up as kind of the platform for doing better in this new realm of moving people, whether you are selling luxury automobiles, whether you are selling consulting services, whether you are a one or two person design shop, whether you are trying to get your teenage daughter to clean up a room.
I just love how you deliver things in threes: autonomy, mastery, and purpose; attunement, buoyancy, and clarity.
Yes, I'm a card-carrying Trinitarian.
Trinitarian. All right. So you say that in a way there are no natural-born salespeople. How do you mean?
Yeah, well, yes, and yeah. I mean, I think there's this idea. One of the things I tried to explore is there's this idea that I always thought. I actually went down this is one of those cases where my hypothesis ended up. I kept trying to confirm my hypothesis, and people kept rejecting it. And so my idea was this. I thought there were people who were natural salespeople. I always heard, okay, this guy, he could. You hear the phrase, this guy could sell anything.
Ice to an Eskimo.
Exactly, as if Eskimos actually like that's a good thing, selling ice to Eskimos, okay?
Right.
And so, but that's exactly the example that everybody gives, ice to Eskimos.
Right. We just don't think about what we're saying.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, but leaving that aside, but like basically, let's peel it. Let's pull it back one notch here and say this guy could sell anything. It's usually men. I mean, that's people refer to men as more men than women as this. This guy could sell anything. Missile systems, women's undergarments, wholesale seafood, whatever. He could sell anything. And so my idea was, in terms of researching the book, was okay. There are these people out there who are natural salespeople. I'm going to find them. I'm going to spend time with them. I'm going to reverse engineer what they do. I'm going to get to the heart of this. And probably about 9 in 10 really accomplished salespeople who I talked to rejected the idea that there are people who can sell anything. And the reason they rejected it was quite interesting. It goes back to this information. They said, you know what, maybe that was a little bit true at a certain point. But today, when you're selling anything, you have to be an expert. You have to know your stuff inside and out. You can't just have a superficial knowledge and a kind of glad-handing personality, because your customer can get that superficial knowledge instantly. Mm-hmm. So you actually have to know something. And the way you know something is A, care about it, B, work at it. And so the idea that you can be an expert in both missile systems and women's undergarments and wholesale seafood is absurd. Mm-hmm. And the people who and one of the things that came out, this is particularly true in business-to-business sales, and it was really prominent in the interviews, is this idea about expertise, this idea about providing insights, this idea about, in B2B sales, you have to know your prospect, your customer's business inside and out. It isn't enough to have the superficial knowledge of things. You have to be expert. And so people rejected that. So one of my whole ideas was to say I'm going to find these natural salespeople and reverse engineer them. And in fact, people said, don't do that, because it's a different world.
Hmm. You also talk about going from problem solving to problem finding.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's I happen to think that's a pretty interesting notion. But here's the thing. Okay, so let's say that okay, I'm the seller, you're the buyer. People are going to get confused because we're dressed identically. But anyway, I'm the seller, you're the buyer. All right, you're going to buy something, and you know exactly what your problem is. You know exactly what your problem is. Let's say I'm in the lighting business. Okay. Mm-hmm. And you have a light bulb that has burnt out, mm-hmm. and you need to replace your light bulb. You know exactly what your problem is. You don't need me. Mm-hmm. Why would you need me? You know exactly. You have a certain kind of light fixture. You have a certain kind of light bulb that you need. You know exactly what it is.
I'm going to Costco and buying a 14-pack.
Right, or even you might not even have to go to. You might not even have to take the trouble of going to Costco. You could go online and mm-hmm. say, "Here's a particular kind of light bulb for a particular kind of light fixture," and you go online and you go to the Google store and you say, "Here's the cheapest place that I can get it." You don't need me, mm-hmm. okay? You know exactly what your problem is. When you know exactly what your problem is, you don't need a salesperson. Mm-hmm. When do you need me? You need me when you don't know what your problem is, mm-hmm. or you're wrong about your problem. Okay, so I could come in with my expertise in lighting and say, "Hey, Steve, you know what's going on here is that your electrical system is overloaded. That's why that light bulb is burning out." And you're like, "Whoa, wait a second, that's a different. I didn't realize I had that problem." You could say, "Steve, what you're doing actually right now is that you're actually not lighting this room properly because you need to open that curtain and that curtain." And when you open that curtain and that curtain, you're going to have a greater wash of light coming in from different corners. That's going to mean you don't have to turn on your lights as much. It's going to save you energy, and you're going to use for your light bulbs. Whoa! I didn't know my problem was and that's what I'm talking about. But I mean that. And that goes really, Steve, connected to your other question, which is expertise. Mm-hmm. So what you're doing is you're going from solving existent. When people know precisely what their problem is, they can find the answer without you in many cases. Mm-hmm. And or worse. Let's say it's a very specialized kind of light bulb, and you know precisely what you need. You go to me, "Hey, Dan, give me a bid." You go to, Rodriguez Lighting, "Hey, guys, give me a bid." You go to McGillicuddy Lighting, "Hey, give me a bid." You come back, "Dan, I like you, but, Rodriguez and McGillicuddy are," and suddenly we're bidding against it. Right. You're driving the price down. Right. And so solving existing problems, not that much juice in it. What the real juice is identifying problems people don't realize that they have. That's the skill of problem finding, and I think what's interesting, among the things that are interesting, is that problem finding is very much an artistic skill. It's a very different kind of cognitive capability.
You also say that selling's changed more in the last 10 years than it did in the previous 100. We've got to take a break. So hold that thought. When we come back, we'll talk about that. You're watching We Mean Business. I'm Steve Dorfman here with Dan Pink. We'll be back in seconds.
Hands can do incredible things. Now they can even help save a life with hands-only CPR. If you see an adult suddenly collapse, just call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Learn more at handsonlycpr.org.
Welcome back to We Mean Business. I'm Steve Dorfman here with returning guest Daniel Pink, New York Times bestselling author, and we're talking about his book, To Sell is Human, The Surprising Truth About Moving Others. Dan, you say that the world of selling has changed more in these last 10 years than in the previous 100. Why is that?
Yeah, it was what we were talking about before the break, Steve, is it's really a case where buyers and sellers are much more evenly matched in just about any kind of market. Not only markets where you're explicitly selling things, but markets where you're doing non-sale selling. So we talked about buying a car. The car seller and the car buyer are evenly matched on information, but it goes in other kinds of markets as well. Let's say that you're a doctor, all right, and I'm a patient. 1995, you got all the information about what's wrong with my hip, say. And now I come in with a sheaf of paper saying, Dr. Dorfman, pretty sure I know what's wrong with my hip, and I'm pretty sure what remedy that I need, all right? We're evenly matched. I think there's a great example out there and I think a lot of folks haven't reckoned with it, in hiring. So now in our role play, you're trying to hire me. I'm just out of college, and you're trying to hire me for a job at insurance company X, in the corporate office of insurance company X. Okay, 1995, you say, "Hey Dan, come and work at insurance company X. We've got a great corporate culture. We have opportunities for professional development, very collegial atmosphere, and we pay top of the line salaries." I said, "Wow, that sounds awesome, Mr. Dorfman. That's great. Sign me up." Right? Mm-hmm. Now you say, "Hey Dan, come and work at this insurance company. We're really collegial. We have great opportunities for professional development. We pay top-of-the-line salaries for our industry." And I say, "Oh, really, Mr. Dorfman?" Because I was just on Glassdoor.com and found that people inside your company say that everybody hates each other, that they're being thwarted in their professional development, that it's not a collegial atmosphere at all. And by the way, Salary.com says that in this region for insurance companies, you pay way below the median for... and so even in that, you're trying to sell me on coming to work at this job. I'm more evenly matched with the information. And that is a huge, huge deal. Most of what we know about sales, from the time there were sales, the seller had a huge information advantage. And that is no longer true all the time.
According to a Gallup poll on customer expectations, there's 4 levels of customer expectation that will turn a prospect into an advocate.
Okay.
It's accuracy at level 1, accuracy.
Sure, okay.
Level 2, availability. Level 3, partnership. And the highest level, advice and learning. This is what customers expect. Yeah. And it'll turn them from prospect into advocate. How does this correlate with your...
I like that. I actually had not heard that. What's the third level again?
Partnership.
Partnership. Yeah, I think there's something to that. And I think that the accuracy and availability is just table stakes. It just sort of gets you in the game.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't... It's basically the absence of it is a problem. But having it is not an advantage.
Right.
I do think that partnership is actually really. I do think that partnership is an interesting one, because I do think that there is a greater sense. It comes out both in the practice and in the research. A greater sense of collaboration, of being in it together, on a number of different domains. We were talking before about business-to-business sales, and partnership is basically you're selling me something. I'm running a business. Yeah, I want you to be my partner in running my business better. All right, and so. So I think that's an incredibly big part of it, and there also is. Let me make it concrete here. I think it's a good example that illustrates that. I think it's a really interesting point. Let's talk about candy. One of my grandfathers was a candy salesman, and he did not work for Perfetti von Melle, the Italian confectioner. But let's talk about Perfetti. Perfetti makes Mentos, Airheads, those kinds of candies. Privately held company, and they have a sales force. Okay, they're selling stuff. It's old school, man. I mean, it's like they're selling candy. They're going into shops, You're the shopkeeper. You want to buy some Mentos. They're Mento pushers, you know. Hey, kid, you want to buy some Mentos? They're pushing Mentos on people all the time. They actually change the way that they sell. And here's what they do. It goes back to so many things we were talking about, expertise and so forth. This kind of hierarchy from collaboration to learning and insights. They now go into a small retailer, small mom and pop shop. They take their own data. They have a lot of data about what candy is selling and where. They try to get some data from the retailer. They have demographic data about wherever you are. You're in Gaithersburg, okay? Mm-hmm. And so the salespeople get these data, and they come in. I come into you, and here's my sales call. My sales call is, hey, proprietor Dorfman, buy some Mentos, buy some more Mentos, buy even more Mentos. I come in and say, let's sit down. We've done an analysis of your business. We have a lot of data. We've taken some of your data. We've taken some of the demographic data. We know a lot about the confections business. And I'm going to recommend to you a collection of products that we think are going to sell in your store. Not just our products. The entire collection of products that we think are going to sell in your store. Here's what we think that you should have on the counter. Here's our list. And you look at this list and you say, wait a second. You're actually recommending we carry some of your competitors' products? Yes, we are, because that's what our research shows. Our research shows that people in your area love Snickers, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so you know what? You should carry a lot of Snickers. This is a Snicker territory here. And you know what? Maybe in this case, you should buy 4 varieties of Mentos, not 7 varieties of Mentos from us. Right? And now, that's a very different relationship. That is partnership, going to your Gallup third level, and that is also
advice and learning.
Yeah. And so they say that they've made this move from selling candy to selling insights about the confections business. And what happens there? I come in the next time, you're actually kind of interested in seeing me, especially if my advice was good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're kind of, hey, it's my partner.
Yeah.
Level 3. It's my partner. My business partner's coming in here to give me some insights. Now, it turns out, again, just to be clear here, this is not an act of charity. That is my helping you gain insights about the confections business ends up being actually a pretty effective way for me to sell Mentos. But my primary goal is to help you, to provide insights to you. As a consequence of that, I'm going to sell some Mentos. I'm going to sell some Airheads.
I love it.
And I'm going to get further insights myself.
So this is going to surprise people, but it turns out strong extroverts do not make for good salespeople. Why is that?
Well, there's a myth out there that strong extroverts, that there's a certain type of person is a good salesperson, the very strongly extroverted person. And what some interesting, great new research from Adam Grant at the University of Pennsylvania shows is that is a myth. Now, there's a body of research that shows that the correlation between extroversion and sales performance is essentially 0. Extroverts get hired more at sales jobs. They get promoted more in sales jobs. But when you actually look at the link between the trait of extroversion and who sells stuff, it's basically non-existent. So Grant did some research, and the punchline of it was this. He went to a software firm. He measured the introversion and extroversion levels of the people in the sales force. Then they go out and sell software. Looks at the numbers. Here's what happens. Who does better, the introverts or the extroverts? The extroverts did a little bit better. But neither group did nearly as well as a third group, what are called the ambiverts. And ambiverts did, if you look at the bar chart, it looks like this. Introverts, extroverts, ambiverts. They did significantly better. And ambiverts, which is a term that a lot of people don't know.
No, you introduced me to it.
Yeah, I only got introduced to it a couple of years ago. I didn't know about it. We have this very binary view. You're an introvert or an extrovert. And the truth is that there's a third category that's actually a pretty highly represented category. It's been around, it's been in the literature since the 1920s, called ambivert, meaning I'm not strongly introverted, I'm not strongly extroverted. I'm a little bit of both. And it turns out that these people, these ambiverts, are much better. Okay, strong introverts stink at sales. Okay, they really do. That doesn't surprise us that much.
Sure.
But strong extroverts, the data show they're only a little bit better. They're actually not that good. These are the people are kind of the naturals. Hey, the kind of
affable,
gregarious. Hey, gregarious, backslapping.
Yeah.
Harvard Business Review has published some research showing basically an inverse relationship between gregariousness and sales success.
Wow!
Inverse.
Wow!
Yeah.
Right.
And so basically, the ambiverts do the best. Why? Let's go back to the prefix. ambi, like ambidextrous. They can go left, they can go right. They're more versatile. They have a wider suite of options. So what do? They know when to speak up, they know when to shut up. Okay? If you talk too much, you're going to lose sales. If you don't talk enough, strong introverts, you're going to lose sales, all right? If you push too hard, you're going to lose sales. If you don't push at all, you're going to lose sales. So it's really a matter of know when to speak up, know when to shut up, know when to push, know when to hold back. Just are much more ambidextrous in their abilities, and these ambiverts do better. The good news for all of us, going back to your question about are there natural salespeople, is that in some ways the answer is kind of sort of yes, because most of us are ambiverts. And I think the broader issue here is, again, I only knew about this a couple years ago, and to me it's like a revelation, because I always test more on the introverted side than the extroverted side. But I'm not like super duper, hermit like introvert. I mean, I'm more introverted than extroverted, but I've learned how to be some of the skills of extroverts, and so this idea that most of us are ambiverts, to me, is actually kind of refreshing.
Yeah. So it has me think of just being a chameleon. Now we have less than 3 minutes remaining, so we're going to try something new. On your recommendation, rapid fire questions, rapid fire answers.
Okay.
All right. So
I'll take capitals for 200.
another. And now we have 2 minutes. Another thing that has us think of chameleons is you talk about mirroring and mimicry.
Yes.
Yeah.
It turns out that when we mirror people's gestures, posture, and so forth, we have actually, as strange as it sounds, we're better able to understanding where they're coming from.
All right.
So mimicry is not duplicitous. Mimicry is what human beings do.
You say when it comes to buoyancy, we should all be more like Bob the Builder.
This is good stuff. The fascinating research showing that you're better off in many cases before an important encounter, sales call, important meeting. Our instinct is to pump ourselves up. You can do it, Dan. You can do it. You're actually better off in many cases saying, can you do it? Moving from declarative to interrogative.
Before we can sell before we can sell a product or service, we've got to sell ourselves, of course, right? So how can people be more effective at selling themselves?
I think part of it is just is sort of getting out of their own heads and seeing things from the other person's perspective. That is, understanding where someone else is coming from is the prelude to finding that common ground.
You say that clarity on how to think without clarity on how to act can leave people unmoved. 30 seconds.
One word. It's hyphenated. Off-ramps. Many times, it's less important to change people's minds than to just give them a convenient off-ramp to act. That's a really important point. Look for off-ramps. Make it easy for people to act.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
Bonus round?
I wish. So to learn more about Daniel Pink and his best-selling books, you can visit WeMeanBiz.tv. I'm Steve Dorfman. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.